Okay. Okay, so it is Monday, March 10th at 2:30. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board. I am Janet Hurley, the chair, and
Sarah Had, present.
Brooke Dingledine, present.
and we have two members online. Alex, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Alex Weinhagen, hello.
And
Kirsten.
Kirsten?
Kirsten Sultan, present.
Thank you. So, do we have any updates to the agenda from anybody? Sounds like no. I do not see any public attendees. I see staffers. Are there any members of the public that I'm not seeing that would like to make any comments on items not on the agenda? Sounds like no. So moving right along. Wow. Consent agenda. You have minutes to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Sarah Had.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on the minutes, corrections?
I think on page 2, there's that extra the under item E,
Mm-hmm.
developed in the either the.
Got it.
Is that?
There are a couple more under the 130 legislative update. The zeros turned into O's.
Yeah.
And then there was an extra zero in the 50,000.
Got it.
Any other minutes, corrections, or comments? Okay. Then I think we can vote. All those in favor of approving the March 3rd minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
I wasn't there, but I viewed the recording. I'll vote with the majority.
Okay. That was a unanimous passing of the minutes, approving of the minutes. So, studies and reports updates, process and updates. Alex, you want to start?
Sure. So next Monday, the 17th, we'll be in Rutland, and I'll be giving the board a presentation on the tier 3 work that we have to do. Been coordinating with Billy Coster at A&R. He's provided a very draft summary of the critical resource areas that the statute calls out for us to consider for tier 3. And we'll be working with him some more this week to polish up a presentation and give you something good to chew on for next Monday. I did email the stakeholders that the prior chair, Sabina, had made a list of, and that Pete and Billy and I had been discussing over the last couple of weeks. So they've all been notified that we did not forget about them and that we will be convening them shortly. And I still have desires to add 2 or 3 additional people to that stakeholder list, and I'm fleshing them out. Yeah, more to say on that next week.
Okay, thanks. Kirsten, do you have any news for us?
No, I mean, it's the same ongoing file review, scheduling interviews. So nothing specific new to report.
This is for the wood products manufacturers study that
Correct.
Kirsten is spearheading.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
I think just that I've been continuing to have conversations with people, do some investigative work. And I think I'll be looking to put pen to paper and give a report probably at the beginning of April on the tier 1A.
Okay. And Brooke?
On the appeals study, I've moved all of my documents into the Y drive under our working documents. Under my name, there's two different subfolders. One is for appeals and the other is for policies and procedures. So I'm kind of collecting some stuff on that as well. Those are broken down into subtopics like history of Act 250, the court, the environmental division, so that's where I'm putting like the data and the statistics. So there are a number of subfolders in there. Hopefully they are orderly and rational so that I can continue myself to find what I'm looking for each time that I go there. I started the conversation with A&R about the coordination of appeals there. A&R Deputy Secretary Charles Martin is going to serve as the initial point of contact to discuss ideas around the EJ Community Regulatory Ombudsman
Idea.
concept that I floated at the monthly meeting with A&R last week. And so they have assigned him to embrace that concept with us. I worked on the timeline over the weekend and I'll be able to email that to folks probably tomorrow. I'd hope to do that for today, but it just took more time than I thought. The timeline is shaping up where I'm hoping to engage our agency stakeholders during April and during the latter half of April and May. Overlapping with May and June is for the additional stakeholders that we want to also engage with that are not specifically mentioned in the statute, or we're expanding on one of the categories that the statute references. So lots of legwork going on right now, just trying to get everything organized. The stakeholder process I will have on Wednesday in terms of being able to talk with Rachel about what our needs are for setting up meetings, personnel, you know, what kind of computer support we need. And then what I'd like to do this week, if possible, is try to get some dates for those actual meetings to take place so that we can really zero in now, you know, to get enough lead time so that people can get organized and they can have the ability to attend the session that they want, because it looks like the easiest way to break it down is really by topic. And, you know, if others have better ideas about that, we don't want to have people have to come back multiple times for different sessions if that's avoidable. But we really think that, you know, focusing on, for example, the court model versus the board model. I think that, you know, many of the lawyers might be more interested in talking about one, right? The court model that they use now, versus, you know, we have a lot of people who have a lot of historical knowledge who worked in the system when it was the environmental board. And although the board compositions are different, I think there's a lot to be gathered and learned from the environmental board statistics, as well as the institutional memory of folks who were involved in that process then, because all of those firewall issues were dealt with as the appellate body, the safeguards so that we were not, in essence, you know, kind of reviewing our own decision. And so I think those are really helpful and informative because they worked then. And that really is the model, the number one model, I think, that we will be pursuing in the board model. And trying to really flesh the skeleton on that through the stakeholder process, I think would be, is really using all of those resources that we have in those brain trust folks to make sure that we get the best options available for the legislature. So that's where we are on appeals.
Thank you. I'll quickly report on
It
the,
looks like Alex may have a question.
oh, go ahead, Alex.
Oh, it's
Sorry.
okay, Janet. You go first, and my comment is more general for all of our
Okay.
reports and studies.
Okay. So, sorry, for the regional plan, application process, we've been meeting with Rachel and Alex P., who are very competently mapping out a digital intake, digital intake steps that we'll have for that process. And in terms of, I have sort of mapped it out in terms of what our statutory obligations are throughout the process there, but also where we're going to be developing guidelines and whatnot. So I'm going to continue to work on that. Maybe also propose some forms that we might be using for various aspects of that process. For the environmental justice work that we will be doing, I attended a meeting on Friday along with Jenny of the Interagency Environmental Justice Committee. It was an impactful meeting, and I think one thing that will come out of that meeting is that I think there will be maybe a little bit more communication between the covered agencies on one-to-one basis, perhaps. And so I would like to pursue that a little bit with some of the other covered agencies as we work on how to meet our EJ law obligations. And just before I forget, I just want to say that Brooke had asked us to each provide a written summary of our summaries for the minutes. So I would hope that each of us can do that, maybe following the meeting, just pop an email to Brooke that summarizes the update that you gave at the meeting so that she can easily get that into the minutes. So go ahead, Alex.
Right. Thanks for the reminder about the help for Brooke on minutes on that front. I would have forgotten. So two things. One, with regard to our public facing sort of engagement projects, like the appeal project that Brooke is leading on, the appeal study, the tier 3 rulemaking, and there's a couple others that we haven't talked about, but also the wood products manufacturers study that's already underway that Kirsten's leading on. So two things. One, I think we need to have a web page for each of these so that there's a landing page for people who are interested in them to go and get basic information, like that we're doing it, like where we are in what phase we're in terms of that work. When we hope, what an approximate timeline might be, and how they can engage or who they could contact. So I think we should figure that out, how to create a landing page for each of these efforts. I know it'll be super helpful for the tier 3 work that I'm helping the board lead on, because especially average members of the public are going to have very basic questions like what's tier 3 in the first place, and it'll be much easier to have a web page to deal with that. So that was one thing, and then two, I think it might be helpful if we as a board talk about the engagement process that we want to have in these various studies and rulemaking efforts, so that we can learn from each other and also have a little bit of consistency as to how we're reaching out to the both the sort of interest groups that have a lot of specific knowledge that we need to leverage, and also just members of the public and community groups that have valuable feedback but may need a lot of education about what it is that we're asking them. And so I know that for the wood products manufacturing work that has already started, there was file review like Kirsten mentioned, and surveys to a sample of permittees, and then there are now interviews that are going to be happening. And we didn't really shape that process as a board, right? That was sort of already happening when we came on, and Forest Parks and Recreation was part of the lead on that. But with regard to the appeals study, the tier 3 rulemaking, the tier 2 study, which we haven't talked much about, but we also has a February deadline, so we're going to have to get on that at some point. It might be nice to talk a little bit more about what the outreach is going to look like.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so, I mean, maybe this is an offline question, Rachel, but do we have, digital space for more web pages?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's I think it would be helpful to know what kind of content you
Yeah.
might be wanting to put up, Alex, and similarly for the other board members, if you want web pages, what that content might
Content,
look like, and I think we can start there.
Yeah,
With that.
and pass that to staff that can implement it. Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Okay,
Yeah, I'm certainly not expecting staff to generate much in the way of content. I think
right,
each of us can say that, I want this text, I want this text, I need a, that sort of thing, a hyperlink here or there. But yeah, if we have the bandwidth technically to do it, which I imagine we do, like Rachel said, in my mind, it's text. There may be some images that go up on each of these pages as well, and the ability to add links to documents and hyperlinks to other sites, at least at the front end. And then we can talk more about how we're going to leverage the site for public comments, which is a little more involved.
yeah. Okay. Kirsten, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Alex, I think that's a great idea for each one of these studies to have its own kind of spot on our website that people can go to. And the plan development sort of process and public engagement piece that's still in, being implemented. I think it's definitely great for the board to talk about how it wants to be doing that for all the different studies, because the model that's underway for the wood products manufacturing, I mean, that's just one example of how one can go about it, and I'm sure there's ways to improve it. I think through since the board has been in the loop on that study work, we've added some stakeholders to the stakeholder group. So that's been something that has changed through just kind of thinking through that process. And, I'd be happy to talk to anyone about, how I see that working, and if there's opportunities to learn from what has occurred thus far. And I'm wondering, Brooke, you had mentioned a conversation with Rachel about kind of, I think, more the technology piece around, I think, public engagement. And I didn't really understand what was meant by that with respect to the appeals study that you're working on. Like, what exactly are you and Rachel looking to define as part of that study work? Just how to hold the public meetings and make information available.
Yeah, she has many skills that we must utilize. One of them is the logistics of setting up stakeholder meetings and the technology basis for that. But separate and apart from that, part of the appeals study is to figure out the platform or the computer capacity, and I'm not using the right terminologies, but it's how do we make the system work for the appeals documents and process? So Rachel, through the process of onboarding and creating the platform for the regional plans and that kind of thing, can utilize that information, hopefully, to be able to then estimate for us what kind of personnel are needed, what kind of costs are involved for technology to create the, what do you call it? The framework, the
Digital infrastructure.
digital infrastructure to be able to operate as an appeals board, to expand our capacity beyond
Okay,
the submission process.
so that would be,
So we need like a different place for appeal documents to be placed and processed. And that
Okay, so-
requires how many people and how much money for technology upgrades or whatever has to happen.
so that's looking beyond the study itself, but as a component of the study, like this is one detail. If this format was advanced, this would involve this technology component. Okay, now I
Yeah, it
understand.
doesn't, well, I don't think it goes beyond the study. I think it is the study, because part of what the legislature needs to know is not just compare and contrast the two different models, but how much is it going to cost to actually institute the board, changing from just continuing to use the court infrastructure and then changing over to using the board as the appellate body. So it's kind of like reconstructing what the environmental board did with the documents, in the prior setup. But obviously, we're a lot more technologically
Muchly
advanced.
advanced, yeah. You
Well,
have another question, Kirsten? Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's not really a question, it's just kind of a mention. With the wood products manufacturing study and the plan to make available a draft report for public comment, we had envisioned that we would make probably, make different formats of public comment available. In other words, a way for the public to provide written comment on the draft report, and also an opportunity for people to attend in person and simply articulate the public feedback. I was envisioning, a Teams meeting, perhaps some in-person opportunities, maybe one north, one south. So we hadn't really gotten to the point of defining exactly how that will be made available to the public, but the idea was to, again, provide a variety of ways so that people aren't just locked into, oh, this is one meeting, and if you weren't able to make it, now you can't comment.
Kirsten, can you remind us what the time frame for comment is that you're anticipating in terms of dates, roughly?
So off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. It was beginning of May. It's like May 5th or something thereabouts that we would have the draft report. And then we were planning a 2-week comment period. And then time for the stakeholder group to reconvene if necessary, if there was substantive comments for which the stakeholder group and the land use review board obviously would be making more substantive edits in response to the public comments.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, but originally we had developed the timeline that I had worked on with the FPR contact was putting us at May 30th for study completion, including roughly a whole month for that last kind of public comment component and finalizing of the report. And then we added on another month, taking us till June 30th. So the dates may, be a little bit in flux because we have a little bit more
Yeah.
time.
I mean, I think we can think of a couple of meetings of the board in May as public meetings to take in information on the draft. So probably mid to late May. And, since our meetings are hybrid, that gives people the option to attend physically or remotely. And we could, do one south, one north. It sounds like a good idea to me. So,
Okay, great.
Items on that. I think Kirsten's point about making sure that there's also an option for people to just submit written comments via an email, whether it's Kirsten's or some generic one, whatever. We ought to do that. Of course, it's easy.
Yeah.
In addition to the meetings. Also, Kirsten, I think we should think about whether once the draft is distributed and we get comment, whether it goes back to the stakeholder group at all, or whether it just stays with the land use review board and we make the edits that we feel are necessary based on the comments received. You're more in touch with your stakeholder group, obviously. I don't know them, but at some point their input ends and the report becomes ours. Based on the work that, the consultations that they provided and all the good information they provided. But I'm just wondering at the very end whether it really makes sense to have the stakeholders have to parse public comments and respond to them, or whether that's a job for this board to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think if there's conceptually in my mind, if there's time for this stakeholder group to weigh in on any public comment received, I think that's helpful. But yeah, ultimately it's the land use review board, and maybe that's how it will get finalized.
Well,
The other thing is, before the draft report, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, remember that at least in my mind, the purpose of the stakeholder group is to gain expertise and excellent feedback and to build consensus. But there isn't a requirement that they all agree, right? And they may
Correct.
not. And so once we get to the point of having a real document that the public is commenting on, it might be difficult to get the stakeholders to come to some sort of consensus about how to respond to those comments, if at all.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm thinking, like, it may make more sense at that point for us as a smaller group to do that. But I'll leave it at that.
Well, yeah, the other thing I want to mention is I think it's going to be important for the land use review board to have input on the draft report. Obviously, like this is so we'll have additional conversations about how we want that to occur, that draft report development once the stakeholder group is kind of at the point of having some more specific content to offer up to the land use review board. So we're not there yet, but yeah, I think we're going to have to, have our own kind of additional supplemental working group of the land use review board members compiling and, putting together the draft report. Because, I want to make sure that obviously, it's the land use review board's draft report. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Brooke, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment just so that you understand what I've been contemplating for the appeals, for the structure of the appeals report and feedback on it. Stakeholder meetings, I'm looking at hopefully, during this late spring and summertime, May, June. Now, when we get the draft report drafted, couple stakeholders have already mentioned to me how important it is that they would like to comment on the draft report. They don't want to be engaged in the summertime and then all of a sudden in the fall, some report comes out and they're like, but, that's not what we meant. Or, they think meaningful engagement means that they get to see the work product before it's finalized and have a meaningful conversation at that moment, whether it's in written comment, et cetera. Anyways, fine, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm doing that month out. I'm planning on the draft report coming out like October, first week of October. Give the folks 2 weeks to review it and either send in written comments or show up and I'm contemplating like a hearing. I mean, not formalistic
Yeah.
hearing, but it's the only thing we're going to do that night. I know it's not just going to be one of the things on our agenda because it's that important that we have an actual public meeting about it. And then we will have 2 weeks to take the information that we hear and make decisions whether or not we're changing anything or altering it in any way. That's not going to then go back to anybody because, as Alex says, at some point the process has to stop. But I want to make sure that final opportunity for the final, cake that we're baking, folks have input at that moment in time. I think it's critical. So that's sort of how I'm envisioning how we're going forward on the appeals thing. So it's like two pretty separate stakeholder processes. One is sitting down and working and understanding where people are coming from on different issues so that we can construct the models. And then at the end, here are the models, here's what we're going to say about them, and here's what we're going to do for a recommendation. Got any last, words about it? Not that it has to be rushed. It can be thoughtful at that time, but that's, I think, a really important commitment that I certainly want to be able to provide and to produce for our public.
Go ahead, Alex.
I like the way you're thinking. My question is, and sorry to be in the weeds in this a little bit, but we don't get a chance to work together very much except these meetings. So this feels like a good work session.
Yeah.
Do you envision, given that the stakeholders will have had more touches, input, bites at the apple along the way than the general public, do you envision that the appeals report, a draft version of it, would actually go to the stakeholder group first? Then the board would take any feedback from the stakeholder group, revise that draft, and then promulgate that out to the general public for a final round of public comment? Or do you instead envision that we come up with a draft report and just seek input from everyone, stakeholders and the general public, all at the same time at that close at the end there?
It depends on the stakeholders. We have some agencies we need to be working hand in hand with through this process. So I expect them to be our partners through the process, not in the same position as, some of the stakeholders, I'm expanding like the categories of, folks engineers that do development work or Act 250 work. We want more than one. And so while there are those kinds, A&R, the agencies that we have to coordinate with on this, they're really our partners in this. So I see them as along for the ride with us and having more cooperative input and guidance with us. So, but the final, I think, then the majority of the other stakeholders, I think, and the public probably will be in one category at that final stage.
Especially if we are aiming for the beginning of November to turn this over to the legislature. Maybe that would be a little bit different if we had till January 15th, but we're hoping to accommodate the House General with this new deadline.
And we're counting on Pete to buy us a little bit more time.
Two more weeks.
We've made the request.
Okay.
What are we at
We're gonna try to
now? The
accommodate.
15th or?
15th.
Oh,
We're at the
okay.
15th.
Okay, we got the 15th. Okay.
Well, we're hoping.
We're
That's the
hoping.
request.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, I think it's really important that we set expectations accordingly with the stakeholders that we are engaging with, because I guarantee you that if we don't do that, some of them will feel disrespected if they aren't given the opportunity to have early comments on a draft of whatever we're working on, report, rules, what have you. But if we tell them up front, like, we want your input and we're going to get it at the front end, and then because of time horizons, we'll take your input again on the draft rules or report at the tail end, then at least we've set the expectation according to what our process needs to be.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, Alex, the other thing that I think is incredibly important, when I met with Thomas Weiss, and he has vast knowledge and experience in this, he said to me, what are you trying to arrive at through the stakeholder process? Because you need to make sure that people understand what their role is. Is it advisory? Are you looking for consensus? And no, we are not looking for consensus for the appeals, because we know that it is kind of an adversarial issue, right? And so we know that there are going to be strong feelings on either side. And what we're trying to do is study it and then make recommendations. So to me, it's about, we need the information. We need why people have the positions that they have. There are very good reasons why they do. And then on the other side, there are very good reasons why the other side, whether it's one model versus the other. Making sure that people understand we are not looking for a consensus. We have to make this decision. That's what the board was charged with doing in terms of recommendations to the legislature, who will ultimately decide it. So I think the stakeholder process in the appeals is incredibly important, because we need to make sure that all sides of this are accurately portrayed. The pros and the cons of each position is vitally important, because ultimately that's what we need to articulate to give the legislature the right information to make their determinations. So that quality of what the process is going to be about, but making sure that we stick to that and do reflect the information that we have obtained from everybody. But
So
you're not calling.
the five of us should be on the same page then. I think we're all here. We should be on the same page that that's the message we're going to send through all of these various processes that we're doing, right? That's kind of a substantive procedural decision point. Are we looking for consensus from stakeholder groups to help move us forward? Or are we looking for their input and perspective, but we're not looking to have them come to a kumbaya moment before, a set of recommendations moves forward. I agree with you, Brooke. I'm on that page, but I'd like to hear from Janet and Sarah and Kirsten so that we can all be speaking with the same voice.
Yeah, Kirsten, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I wholeheartedly agree with Alex, and that it's critical to make the expectations clear so that all these participants understand their role and the process looking ahead. And from my perspective, sure, if there can be consensus on some things that are aligned with, the Land Use Review Board's position on something, that's great. But we're not going to have consensus on everything, particularly on the appeals. I mean, or there's going to be things, just the nature of the work that we're doing. So, and I'll share with you. So, the stakeholder group for the wood products manufacturing study, FPR, actually sent out an email invitation, and Oliver Pearson, the forestry director, drafted the invitation, very carefully worded, and Pete and I had an opportunity to review it. and suggest some minor tweak, just to spell it out for those individuals, exactly, how this would be, you know, working, looking ahead, that it's not just the stakeholder group coming up with a report that is, you know, what goes into the legislature, that it's, you know, there'll be an additional process with, you know, the land use review board and additional public comment process as well. So, yeah, I'm not stuck on, you know, do we have to look for consensus or not look for consensus? But I think I agree with what Brooke said. It also, in terms of the stakeholders, it can depend on who it is. If it's not a state agency, the wood products manufacturer, just as a reminder too, the statute calls for the land use review board to develop the recommendations in consultation with FPR. So they're obviously a very important partner in this. So
Sarah, do you
I think
have?
we're all,
I don't have stakeholders group, so in
Right.
some ways, I'm an easier one to go along with the rest.
Mhm.
So.
And nor do I in setting up the regional plan application procedures and whatnot, but yeah, I mean, consensus is great if it's there, but we don't have a mandate to seek it. We do have a mandate to get information and to be thorough about gathering that information. And yeah, certainly out of respect, we should be clear with those that we're engaging as to, you know, what can they expect from us in terms of, you know, seeing what our ultimate products are going to be. So I'm on the same page on this. Alex, go ahead.
Great. Sounds like we're all on the same page. That's helpful for me because I'm trying to structure my presentation for next Monday to talk a little bit about the engagement process that I think we should use on the Tier 3 project. But just to put a finer point on it, I think maybe that means we're all on the same page that the author of the draft of whether it's a report or rules is us,
Mhm.
not the stakeholder group. It might be us in close coordination with our key partners like Brooke mentioned, whether that's ANR or what have you, but we're not asking the stakeholder group to write a report. We're asking for their input and to help us write a report. Yes?
Yes.
Thanks.
We have 2 more minutes on this item on the agenda. I'm happy to extend it if we think we may not need as much time further on, but does anyone have any other thoughts or updates or process questions or comments about our various, what we've called silos that we're working on as individual board members? Go ahead, Kirsten.
so in terms of the regional plan approval work, the March 31st meeting in the Northeast Kingdom, I did have a sort of general question from NVDA as to whether or not the Land Use Review Board has any specific questions or topics or kind of special focus to NVDA's update of its regional plan work that it will be presenting to us at that March 31st meeting. If there's things that we want to make sure they touch on, or we have questions for them, let me know if anyone has anything in particular we would like to cover with them at that meeting, as their work is continuing and evolving on their RPC plan work. Just let me know because I can help liaison with them.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is these traveling meetings, inviting the RPCs were envisioned to give them an opportunity to give us an update as to where they are. But I don't think we're going to be in a position to say, you need to do this or that at that point. So
Makes sense.
go ahead, Alex.
I agree with Janet, Kirsten. I don't want that meeting to be an opportunity for us to start giving them advice about how to structure their plan or how to make sure they get our approval. I'm more interested in hearing from them on on where they stand and maybe interesting projects in the region and that sort of thing. We'll have time in the summer to put them through the review process on the plan itself. The item I wanted to mention before we close is just to remind everybody that just because we've designated leads on each of these Act 181 responsibilities, these are board responsibilities, and we should all take ownership of them. So I'm gonna poke Brooke, with regular frequency on the appeal stuff and ask questions and make suggestions. And I hope that Brooke will do the same on the tier 3 stuff that I'm trying to work on, and that everybody else will do the same. I do think that it's important that, we identified leads, but I need all of your help. I need all of your help to make sure that we get this right. So yeah, just that.
Good point. Any other additions for studies and reports? Okay. So we have next on the agenda meeting procedures. I think we were just going to sort of circle back on this to talk about things such as how are we going to respond to public comment, and are we going to have particular procedural policies around how we do that, and other but also rules of procedure. So I'm interested in developing guidance for us to follow as we hold these public meetings. Are we going to be using Robert's Rules of Order and all those sorts of questions that we've initially raised? So can I open it up for people's thoughts on these matters? Board members?
I'll jump in. As long as I can remember, I have been on boards or I have given advice to boards, all of whom think that they follow Robert's Rules of Order. Honestly, I started reading them one time and they are so dense. And then there's like an abbreviated version.
Yeah.
I think that there is enough guidance in Vermont law for us. We're operating legally, in my estimation. Making sure that the public has an opportunity to speak. And we're giving more than what is required by the law, not only non-agenda items. We want to make sure we ask for agenda items. We have really great public that wants to be involved in watching what we're doing, which I think is great. And I think it's going very well. I'm not sure that we need to really institute some official version of how we operate our meetings, as long as we're doing everything appropriate for open meeting law. If things became a problem where we have so many public people that we have to limit their time, that's in the board chair's discretion. Perhaps when we're doing the stakeholder meetings, we should be more formalized and have an actual process kind of articulated. Here are the rules. You get 3 minutes to talk. If there's more time later, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But I am much more concerned about our procedures or guidelines in terms of how we're making decisions.
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't think there's anything wrong with the way we're operating, but I want the public to understand that when we go into executive session, that is a secret meeting, that we get to talk about a case, for example, that might be pending. And that's important that we do that, not in the public view because of the circumstances. But we need, I think, to communicate with our public and with our staff. We need to have our guardrails published. We need to explain. When we go into executive session, and we are considering a case, here are the guiding principles that we employ when we want to, when we're engaged in litigation, because many cases are settled and we don't want the integrity of Act 250 to be compromised. We don't want undue influence of any parties that should not have influence. We need to recuse ourselves if we have a conflict of interest. So I spent some time kind of gathering some templates that we can pattern after. I'm in the process of drafting up and talking with staff about how do we create the right kind of process that gives, for example, our district coordinators and our district commissions the independence that the statute has provided to them for decision making, while at the same time ensuring the integrity of the program. That's a real balance because we have all the district commissions by design. They are to consider the topography, the needs, the ways in which the different parts of Vermont have evolved, and serving Vermonters in those geographic areas may be different depending on which district that you're in. So there's a very important basis for having independent judgment of our different districts. But we also do have to, and this is the real trick, we have to figure out how to have supervisory control over the decisions that are being made without reaching down and crossing the boundary and doing their job for them, because that is impermissible.
Mhm.
So having here, that's your guidance. And then the second piece to it is, if you need help, you can use the legal staff. Okay. If you need a lawyer, sometimes, these are facts, and applying the law to a different set of facts, everything could be considered novel in a way. And you try to figure out, are we applying the law the same way in this case as that case? Well, the facts are different. And so that's what the whole decision-making process is about. It's to use the guiding principles that you have in good faith. You make the best decision. Our employee makes the best decision that they are charged with making, or the commission makes that decision. And that needs to be honored. And we need to make sure that when things go up on appeal, like a jurisdictional opinion or a permitting appeal, that the rules or the guidance that we've given the district coordinator or the district commission is followed. And if it's followed in good faith, maybe at some point the environmental division or the Supreme Court might disagree with a decision that we make. And that's okay, because that's the nature of the beast. And so long as we can ensure that our people are doing their job according to all the dictates and the case law and all of those precedents, but we have to put that down in writing to say, this is what you have to do in your job. And then when we are dealing with an appellate situation, what are our rules? Can we settle a case? If so, under what circumstances? What are the factors that we consider legitimate to use an exit ramp from letting the court decide? So I have 2 documents I'm working on, and a third one I've taken precedent from Department of Justice, who have very dense regulations on this and trying to analogize from that to get those guiding principles articulated on a piece of paper. Now, if we stay within the bounds of the factors that we consider appropriate for resolving cases absent litigation, that's all that we can do.
That I think is very different than meeting rules.
Yeah,
I think what we're talking about for this agenda item right now is procedural rules for how we run these particular meetings, correct?
I think that both issues came up and it probably just didn't get translated into this agenda. I
It's
think
sort
that
of overlap.
they overlap. It is procedural. It may be in executive session that we have those procedural guidelines.
But that's like
But-
operating procedures more so than
Then public meeting
rules.
procedures, right? There's,
Procedure.
I mean, I think I think it's appropriate to talk about both. Because I think that that's part of where this came from to get on this agenda. But Alex, your hand is up?
Yeah, I just was gonna agree with Sarah that Brooke and I have talked about this a little bit, what she just mentioned about operational decision making and process. So I think there is a larger conversation there. But what I was expecting today was a shorter conversation, a somewhat less big conversation about, meeting procedure and some of the other items that Brooke mentioned, like what is our protocol for going into executive session, and how do we operate with regard to public comments, how are agenda items brought forward to the group. I don't know, Janet, have you written one of these before?
Yeah, I
for-
had to for several different boards every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Because municipal boards are required to have rules of procedure and, so, and I can work on that, just as Brooke is working on these others and bring them
I'm
to the
happy
board.
to.
Okay,
As well. I mean, I
Yeah.
could co-collaborate too, but I've done a bunch of them too. And I would like to see the board have some very simple rules of procedure of how to run these meetings.
yeah,
I'll give you, for instance, we've talked about public participation, how to facilitate that. When you have somebody walking into a meeting like this, it's very useful for them to be able to see, here's how we're going to take your public participation, here's what you can expect, here are the times. So a lot less complex than what you have, just because it's really geared more towards the external side, is the person walking in off the street and wanting to be able to participate. And there's something that I used a long time ago, which I think works very well, which says, that all meetings of the body are meetings in the public, not necessarily of the public, and members shall be afforded a reasonable opportunity to express opinions about matters considered by the board, so long as order maintained is according to these rules. Just very simple statements. I don't think that we necessarily have to work by Robert's Rules of Order, but there is Robert's Rules of Order for small boards, which is the Robert's Rules Light, which might be worthwhile for us to look into, because a lot of people come into a meeting like this and expect that you are working under Robert's Rules of
Yeah.
Order, and we'll call you on that. And if you say that, nope, we're not working under any Robert's Rules of Order, it's almost like an unforgivable sin. So I think it's worthwhile taking a look at, is there a way that we can incorporate some of that lighter version to it? So I'm happy to look into that, start
There-
drafting something.
there were in some of our rules, that we operate this way, and when there's a question, we go to Robert's Rules. And, I actually purchased the Robert's Rules and had that at hand in our municipal meetings. I never had to use it. I think select boards, they may refer to it a little more often, some of them that are organized about how they run their meetings anyway. So in any case, yeah, Robert's rules are very complicated. I've never seen the abbreviated versions. If you have a copy, I'd like to see
I
it.
can absolutely.
And I think it's helpful. I think it's true what Sarah said, that there are people all over this state who expect us to be operating under Robert's rules. And, you know, to some degree we can be, and I think we can make everybody happy. Yeah. Alex, is your hand up again, or is that left?
It is. It is.
It is? Okay, well, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I hadn't quite finished my thought when Sarah
I'm
started
sorry.
to riff on
Yeah.
it, and then you next. So two things. One, I'm with Brooke on this. I think we should buck the trend and just abandon Robert's Rules of Order, because the one time I looked into it, I was shocked at how Byzantine and impenetrable it actually was. So if there is a light version that Sarah can provide, great, we could reference that. But otherwise, let's not even mention them. Let's just not go there. But two, I do think a brief, meeting rules and procedures would be helpful. And I would encourage you, Janet, as you put it together, maybe with Sarah's help, that you think about a separate small section about what our procedure is when we're functioning in a quasi judicial manner, as when we
Versus
approve regional plan
open
versus
public meeting.
right
Yeah.
now, when we're not exercising any quasi judicial function at the moment. And they're a little bit different, right? So you might want to have a little section in there about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we don't have that.
We do have some quasi judicial functions
Oh,
currently.
Yeah, approval of
We
regional
refund appeals,
plans,
so on.
approval of tier 1A applications. There are
We, and appeals of certificates of energy
Energy
compliance from the
compliance,
PUC, so. Kirsten,
So I agree with the discussion. What's been said so far about meeting procedure, as I sort of understand the topic somewhat. In terms of the public comment detail, which I think is part of this, I agree with what Brooke said, in terms of public comment process for the studies. Conceptually, I was envisioning that the final studies would include a written responsiveness summary to each comment. Just so it's clear. And I think as far as public comments that come in during the open agenda item or on a specific agenda item during these meetings, I guess I would be kind of maybe looking to you, Janet, as the chair to, give some direction on what each one does or doesn't warrant. Like for instance, there was one at the board meeting held in Essex where a member of the public said that he was unable to locate certain information on the database. To me, that would be like, okay, we'll forward the comment to staff or follow up, or maybe staff in attendance already make it known. We'll take care of this. So it just kind of depends on the comment as to what we do or don't do with the information received. So,
Yeah.
I'm open to whatever we think is most practicable for dealing with those public comments.
just wanna, I think we have a little bit of pushback about responding to every single public comment on a draft. We don't know what we're gonna get. That might be completely beyond our capability to respond to every single comment. I think, we can endeavor to do our best on behalf of the public here, but yeah, so I wouldn't commit us to that.
Yeah.
yeah, there's no legal obligation to respond in public comment. It is for the public to be able to voice their comments to the board. The trick really is, look, this is a board meeting. There are other ways to communicate, if it's like a specific, complaint and we need staff to go deal with it. But In terms of for stakeholder, it's gonna be tough enough even to summarize the comments in the time frame that I'm looking at for the appeals study. There is no time. I mean, I don't even understand what the purpose of that would be. People have their positions about a topic. And, you know, you go on this side and you go on that side. So in the context of the appeals study, I don't see a purpose to responding to comments.
I don't want to cut anything off here, but we are on to the next agenda item in terms of where we are in time. So I think this has been a productive first conversation. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we come back to it at a later date? No.
Good.
Okay, great. We will be continuing to talk about these issues. So we have legislative operations and budget updates. We don't have much legislatively this week, do we?
The legislature was off this week for
Yeah.
town meeting week, so not much that way.
Right.
I'll just mention it's crossover at the end of this week, so policy bills that are in one house will go to the other. And let's see, we mentioned the 15th, we gave some a request to extend the appeals to the 15th. It's been moved up to the 1st in the current draft
Of
of
November.
Oh, they did move it in the draft of the first?
of the. They have it in, they still, so it went back and forth. It
Just
went
so
from the
people
first-
know what we're
so,
talking
yeah,
about, we're
it's
talking
appeals.
about the appeals study and the House Committee on, the House General and Housing
House.
Committee would like the appeals study to come to them at the beginning of November.
Yeah, and they had moved it to the 15th and then they moved it back to the 1st, and we've requested to have it moved to the 15th.
And Act 181 gave us until January 15th. So
Right.
we're trying to accommodate them.
The only other thing I'll say on the legislative front is money bills, any bills with money, their crossover deadline is 2 weeks out. So,
From today?
from the
From
end of,
Friday.
so it's, yeah, from today would be 2
Okay,
weeks, so,
okay.
yeah, it's on, it would be on.
Next Friday.
Friday,
Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Operation wise, I'll just say that, we have a number of, cases at the district level that are going to hearing, and they'll be under the new hybrid, system, so staff are gearing up for that change. Should be exciting. But I think that we've got resources where we need them to make that all happen. I don't have anything on the budget other than what I mentioned on the legislative side of things.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Okay, well,
So let me ask a question if I could about hearings, district commission hearings. Would it be appropriate or not appropriate for members who might want to be able to watch that and to experience the hearing process? Is that, we're not in an.
You're not in an
appellate-
appeal
not right
thing,
now.
it would not,
but-
it wouldn't be bad, but they're gonna
but
be
something-
recorded, so you can always watch it after.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
maybe
yeah,
that's a
okay,
good
it's
idea.
recorded,
because-
right,
But
right.
the other thing is that something that is coming before a commission now, you know, it could be years before it's
Oh, right,
potentially
right,
appealed
right. Okay.
and comes to
Yes.
us if, so
Hmm.
just keep it in mind that, you know, you don't want an ex parte, you know, problem down the road. You know, observation, I think, is fine, but,
We don't want the whole board to have to recuse itself.
right.
Oh, my gosh.
Alex, I see your hand
Allison,
up.
you have a difference of opinion on that, you let us know.
Yeah.
I was
okay.
actually gonna ask the same question that Brooke did because I'm interested. I've been to some in the past, but I think it would be helpful to see them now. So good point about being observational and not participatory. I certainly don't think that having, you know, watched a recording or observed a meeting renders any board member ineligible to participate in an appeal if we
Yeah.
take on that role in the future. But my my question was actually different, and that was related to legislative stuff. And that is, I know that Pete and Janet were good about getting in front of the Committee of Jurisdiction on the House side and getting a positive recommendation for funding from them for our board. But it's the money committees that make the decisions, right? So is there a plan to be in front of those money committees in the next 2 weeks before crossover to see that they actually include the recommendations of House Environment and such?
We can re-engage with them, sure.
Yeah, so we did provide testimony, but we will certainly be monitoring and seeing where things are and interjecting as we need to.
Mhm.
I've just seen a lot of good ideas on the fiscal side go down the drain in those money committees in the last couple weeks prior to crossover, and it's unfortunate. They have to make hard decisions, so I
Yeah.
understand, but at the same time, we have to be effective advocates. So that's just my gentle nudge.
Pete
Keep
and I
on them.
will re-engage this week. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we are
So Janet,
back on track. Go ahead.
Annette Smith has joined the call, so we might
Oh,
need
yeah.
to do a public comment.
Yeah,
for her
before,
before we go.
so, and is there anyone else? So we see that, Annette, we see you've joined our meeting. And we would like to open up to public comment on perhaps any items, whether they were on the agenda or not at this point. Do you have any comments today?
That, it looks like you're unmuted, but if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Huh. It looks like in one place it's unmuted, in the other it's not.
How's that?
Oh, there. Yes,
Sorry.
yeah, we can hear you.
So I do like the idea of you being able to observe district commission hearings. So I wonder if you could look into how you could do that legally, because there's nothing like experiencing it, especially in person. I mean, until you've been through it and until you've seen what happens, you can't appreciate what an interesting process it is. And it really is unique in Vermont. And I think it's the best public process we have for public participation. And so
Yeah.
I don't know, I hear what you're saying. I sure hope you can figure out, you have some opportunities coming up. If there's any way to experience it, even if it's maybe one board member at a time, so that if the recusal question ever came up, the one board member who attended one particular hearing could step back from that one if that was necessary.
I think our consensus among the board here was that would not cause it wouldn't necessarily be a conflict or a ex parte for a board member to have observed.
Yeah.
You just need to be careful not to engage. You don't know?
I don't know. I'd like Allison to look into it a
Yeah.
little bit more
Yeah.
because, if you're watching one party put on their case and then you don't watch the whole hearing, I'm not sure that I'm 100%.
Yeah, okay,
But I think we can work it out
yeah,
to get people exposed.
Well, it
to
really is, I think, a fundamental issue that you all really need to understand because of just how valuable the district commission process is. And we don't ever want things to go to appeals if they can get worked out at the district commission level. And so it really creates I've been through so many PUC cases in the last decade, and I just wish that the land use issues would be heard by the district commissions, because it is so much easier for the public to participate and for the issues to get worked out and improved at a much lower expense than what it takes when everybody's dealing with a much more legalistic process. So I encourage you to learn whatever you can about district commission processes whenever you can. And thank you for asking for my
And
comment.
there are a couple of us who are very, very familiar with the process. Kirsten and Brooke certainly, and I had, I've been to a hearing or two over the years, just not regularly, so,
I've been to several as well.
yeah.
There actually aren't that many hearings anymore. And so when you,
Right.
if you have some coming up, they're, especially if they're big cases, those are probably the most interesting ones to experience, what it's like if you can figure out a way to do it. Okay, thank you for
Yeah.
your good work.
Thank you. All right, we have come to our discussion of appeals enforcement and attorney-client memoranda.
Right on schedule.
Right on schedule, exactly. Wow.
Are you looking to me to make a motion?
Sure, I'm
All
looking
right.
for somebody to,
Whoop.
I mean, I suppose I could if we're not following Robert's rules,
Hang on.
so.
I'll do it. I'm looking at the
Okay.
verbiage.
Got it.
Go ahead.
I will move that we enter into executive session to discuss pending and probable appeals and enforcement actions and to have confidential attorney-client communications on these matters. Oops. And move that the board find that premature public knowledge of these matters would place the board at a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you. Do
I'll
we have
second.
second? Okay, any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Alex, I.
Kirsten was an aye. I saw your hand go up. You're
You're-
muted. Can you just say aye so we can hear you?
I'm sorry, Kirsten, I.
That's okay. Okay, that was unanimous. So we will enter into an executive session. Our aim will be to come back and adjourn by 4:15. So others are welcome to wait for us to come back or not as you see fit.
All right. Do we leave
Um,
or do we just switch laptops?
Tell me when we're,
Ready whenever you are.
okay, we are back, the board. We have no business left to attend to, so
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing, hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye.
Alex, I.
That was 5 ayes. So we are unanimously deciding to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.